Joining me in the discussion, I have Jason Tolbert from Talk Business and also David Ramsey from Arkansas Times. Good morning, guys.
Hey, thanks for having us.
I'm glad you could join me. And this specific issue is one of great debate. And if you can go to both of these, the website of each of these, my guests, you can see the great debate. You can go to talkbusiness.net and see Jason's writings on this, and arkansastimes.com and see David. And it's safe to say that we have one person on each side of this issue. Would you guys agree?
Sure. Well, I suppose so. I mean, to give a little background on the deal, basically, as part of the Affordable Care Act, largely federally funded, there's going to be these guides, and their role is going to be to, as you say, educate folks about how to sign up for health insurance. Also, I mean, the part of the big point of having these guides is to find uninsured folks, to identify them, and let them know that there's an option for insurance. That's obviously important for low-income uninsured folks that have a chance to get health insurance under the health care law, and it's also important for making the health care law work. If you mentioned the private option, which is one piece of this. For that to work, you need people to sign up, and so that's what the guides are for. And Jason, why don't you give your take on what you think is controversial, and then I can respond.
Sure. Well, another point I would make, just to add to David's comments, and I'll begin by saying, me and David come at this from different perspectives, but David is probably one of the most knowledgeable people on healthcare reform in the state. He has studied this issue front and back, knows it like the back of his hand. So he's a great person I would recommend people reading, even though he comes from a completely different perspective from me, because he's extremely knowledgeable on this.
Right, I agree.
But David was talking about the guides, talking about the navigators. One point I would add to this, in the Obamacare legislation, it's confusing to look at which part is kind of optional and which part is mandated. This is one of the things that's really mandated. States don't really have a choice in this. They have to put these navigators in place. I had somebody ask me the other day, is this really a waste of money? Is this something that's really needed? Well, that's really not even up for debate. This is mandated. We really don't have a choice in putting these guides in place. Now, the controversy that's coming up lately that Alice touched on is, who do we hire to do it? We need to get the best navigators that we can, and we need to make sure that we're not putting somebody in place that we really don't want there. The most glaring one that came up when the first list came out was they were going to outsource part of this function to Planned Parenthood, and they were going to have these navigators as part of their organization. I think a lot of people in the state, including myself, have some real problems with using Planned Parenthood for this.
And I want to make sure and note, in David's article, most recent update on this is that, David, you did speak with Jay Bradford, our insurance commissioner, and he wants to alleviate the concerns that people may have at this. I know some state legislators have. The Family Council's Jerry Cox has raised concern about possible use of state funds going to Arkansas's branch of the nation's largest abortion provider, Planned Parenthood. But what Jay Bradford told you, David, was that we're going to make sure and work on them that there is a clear scope of work, and if money is going to Planned Parenthood, it would be designated specifically to be these in-person assisters. Is that correct, David?
Yeah. So and just to be clear, there is no contract with Planned Parenthood. Basically, what happened is the Arkansas Insurance Department cast a really wide net. They communicated with more than 1,000 organizations, sent out a lot of direct mail, had a lot of meetings. They communicated with churches, with businesses, with not-for-profit service providers, with health clinics, trying to identify people that served a community that would likely include low-income, uninsured people. Obviously, the reason that Planned Parenthood is controversial is because they do offer abortion services. They also offer a lot of other health care services. More than half of the people they serve are below the poverty line. So they basically are, they touch the exact population that you want to reach. So that's why they might make some sense as a vendor. the way that this worked is, the Arkansas Insurance Department tried really aggressively to get as many folks as possible to do this, but it's not, basically, and when I say do this, what this means is they'd get a little bit of funding to hire people to be these guides. You mentioned Jay Bradford's idea, which is, he's kind of withheld the contract from Planned Parenthood because he hopes to make the contract even tighter, even more clear. But just to be clear, with all of these contracts, it would be a breach of the rules, it would be a breach of conflict of interest for any of these guides to do anything but try to help identify folks that are uninsured and sign them up for health insurance, which is something that I think we all want, because that's going to be available to people as part of this law that, as Jason said, is happening no matter what.
Understood, David. But the concern by many, there's some legislators that are speaking up in the Family Council, and Jason points out in his piece is that, if we can't do any better than, an abortion provider to help implement this, then we have some serious problems. And Jason points out, Jason Bradford has a connection and relationship and history with Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, Jay Bradford, he's the head of the Insurance Commission. A good guy, not faulting anything against him, but he obviously is very friendly towards Planned Parenthood. He attends their fundraiser every year. He received an award from Planned Parenthood a couple of years ago for helping them with legislative issues. He's obviously someone who has no problems using Planned Parenthood. He thinks they're a great organization.
Again, I mean, the guides that Planned Parenthood would be a vendor in charge of hiring just have not only have absolutely nothing to do with abortion, let me be clear, but have absolutely nothing to do with the services provided by Planned Parenthood. The reason that Planned Parenthood would potentially be a vendor that would make some sense, and again, we can wish that more groups were involved in this basically pretty thankless task. But there were a relatively small number of groups, and it's also the case that Planned Parenthood, the population they serve, is precisely the population we want to target. One thing, thinking about private option policy specifically, one of the reasons that conservatives like Jason were interested in the private option is that you had a lot of transfer populations that would be moving from Medicaid to private health insurance on the exchange. One of those transfer populations is pregnant women. Pregnant women below 200% of the federal poverty level right now qualify for Medicaid. Well, under this so-called private option, those folks would be covered instead on the exchange. So open enrollment is between October of this year through March of next year. One of the policy goals that we should have is to try to identify as many people as possible that qualify and sign them up. And if you have women below 200% of the federal poverty level who don't sign up, and then they get pregnant, they will go to Medicaid. That's a less generous match rate. So the state will lose some money out of that. So from a policy perspective, having and again, let's be clear. In addition to, I understand the reason that folks that are pro-life don't like Planned Parenthood, but Planned Parenthood is a provider of lots and lots of health services to lots and lots of low-income people, and this is the population we want to reach. I would understand the. I think the thing to keep in mind is that if any organization, not just Planned Parenthood, but any organization is using these guides for any other purpose than to spread the word about health insurance options, then something has gone very wrong. That's if that ever happened, then that would be an issue we would have to address.
Well,
rules are going to be very strict about what their role is, and the question we want to ask about these vendors is, do they serve a population that we want to reach? Do they have a good, trusting relationship with that population? I think the answer to those questions in this case is yes.
Well, and one thing to note, and you all are very familiar with this, when you allocate funds to an agency or a group, it's difficult to monitor and track exactly how that money is being spent, and there will be some questions. And just we've got 30 more seconds, but I want to let Jason comment to respond to what you said. But in terms of, any state funds at all going to Planned Parenthood, that will be a concern for conservatives across the state. And Jason, how do you see this thing moving forward?
Well, and I will say, I don't think anyone believes that these navigators are going to be, going out helping people find health insurance in the morning and then going back to the back office and performing abortions in the afternoon. No one believes that that's going to be going on. That's not even consideration. But what will be happening is, obviously, it's going to benefit the organization to have these new employees. It's going to benefit the visibility of the organization to have people coming into their clinic to being comfortable going into a Planned Parenthood clinic for their health services. It's going to increase their public relations image of talking about all the many wonderful things they do, besides being the largest abortion provider in the United States. 40% of abortions in the United States are performed by Planned Parenthood. And obviously they want to create this warm, fuzzy image of being this organization that provides these wonderful health services besides abortion. And that helps them create that image. The concern for me, at least, is not that these employees are going to be doing anything directly related to abortion, but that it's going to help the organization that is the largest abortion provider in the United States. I mean, that's clear. That's where a good chunk of the revenue is. They a lot of times will talk about some statistics about how little their abortion services are. They'll use, I think, a lot of times a statistic where they say only 3% of our services are abortion. Well, that number is actually, they use the total number of people that they provide any sort of service for.
But that's exactly the issue, though. The whole point is that. The whole point is that they're serving lots and lots of people, and they are a health provider for lots and lots of people. The notion that if they weren't guides, that people would suddenly stop using them as health service providers seems a bit off to me. I mean, I understand that many people, Jason included, really don't like them, find them repugnant. He did an impressive job of noting several times in the course of a few sentences that they're abortion providers. The fact is, the thing that this is going to circle back to ultimately is that a state contract like this, you can't not give a contract to a qualifying agency just because you don't like them politically. That's actually not legal. Now, I don't know if whether Planned Parenthood would actually pick that fight. I don't know.
Well, you could also have a lawsuit on the other side there, though. I mean, we have it. I think it's Amendment 68 that strictly prohibits any of our funds going to provide abortion services, even though
except that these funds won't be going to provide abortion services.
It still would be going to the largest abortion provider in the United States, and it still would help them bring in the biggest chunk of their revenue. I mean, I know we talk about all these other wonderful services they provide, but they exist to make revenue off abortions. When you look at their financial statements, that's where their money's coming from. We can talk about percentages and use these pretty figures to make it sound like that's not the case. But when you look at where their money's coming from, we're talking about...
That doesn't change the fact that the guides are unrelated. I mean, one way of looking at it is that if Planned Parenthood wasn't rewarded this contract, it would have zero impact on abortion services one way or the other. And I think that the difficult part of having this conversation is that the reaction here is sometimes more visceral than logical, right? I mean, I understand that, Jason doesn't have to convince me that he really, really doesn't like Planned Parenthood. I get it. That doesn't mean that Planned Parenthood couldn't be a vendor to provide these guides to accomplish something that really has nothing to do with Planned Parenthood's basic services. A good example, I think, to sort of contextualize this, Central Arkansas Library is also hiring guides, right? They're one of the groups that is getting a contract. Now, is this, is having guides making it easier for them to provide book loaning services? No. And I think that when we start saying that these groups are somehow getting some nefarious advantage from doing this work that most people don't want to do, I think we have to ask ourselves, why did so few groups want to sign up? And the reason is that the only upside for this is that these groups believe in the mission of signing up low-income folks to health insurance.
We're gonna have to cut it off there. We're gonna have to go to break there.